Our next speaker, we're just delighted to have with us today Bob Williams, who is the president of State Budget Solutions. And Bob is State Budget Solutions is a nonpartisan organization advocating for fundamental reform and real solutions to state budget crises. And Bob is a former state legislator, gubernatorial candidate, and official with the General Accountability Office. He's a national expert in fiscal and tax policies and election reform, and he's come today to talk about performance-based budgeting. Let's give a warm Kentucky welcome to Bob Williams.
It's really a pleasure being here today. As Jim mentioned, I used to be a Washington State legislator for 10 years. Before that, I was an auditor with the Government Accountability Office at the Pentagon and Post Office. Let me tell you seriously, nothing in that experience, the Pentagon and Post Office, prepared me for the state of Washington and the lack of accountability in state government. I mean, it just really blew me away in terms of that. I'm also a certified public accountant. But State Budget Solutions, we've been really working on core basic issues. We've been working on pension reform, collective bargaining reform, budget reform, and most recently with a colleague, working on federalism in action. We believe now is the time for states to stand up and take back the 9th and 10th Amendment. We'd solve so many of your problems, like coal. And it's really a serious issue. Some of you might know me from my experience at ALEC. I was a 10-year member of ALEC from 1978 to 88. Since then, I've been in the private sector, and normally I put on at least one presentation at every one of the 3 ALEC meetings a year. I was recently the tax and fiscal private sector chair for the last 4 years. And one of the things we've been stressing through ALEC is performance-based budget, priority-based budget, and outcome-based budget. Frankly, in all our states, the budget process is broken. Now, to show the need for what's happening, the Government Accountability Office, where I used to be, put out a report in May saying that closing the fiscal gap that state and local government has will take either a 14.2% across the board reduction in spending now and maintained every year between now and 2060, 2060, or a corresponding 14.2% increase in taxes, or a combination of both. Why is that? Unfunded pensions, unfunded retiree health care, and health care costs. So it's a serious problem that we're facing in the states. And I'm not really going to go into much detail on your pension problem today, other than say State Budget Solutions has a good report out on our website. It shows the problem in this state is much worse than any legislator here believes. It is a very serious problem. Currently, your state employees' salaries and benefits are unsustainable. There is no tax structure that you can devise in this state that will take care of your pension problem without fundamental reforms, moving people out of the defined benefit system into the defined compensation system. If you say that's impossible, talk to your higher education faculty. Do you have a problem in higher education funding for pensions? Why do the higher education faculty love their pension system? Because it's a defined contribution system. If they want to transfer from one university to the other, they can. But if the employer in any given year underfunds the pension, they know that immediately. If the legislature, the governor, underfunds the defined benefit program, you don't know it until you're in Pritchard, Alabama, and the system goes bankrupt, or Central Falls, or Washington Park, Illinois, and suddenly you get no pension. So what we're urging is, I'd be glad to come back and testify in pension reform at any time, but let me tell you, you have a very serious problem in this state, probably the 3rd largest problem in the United States. The current budget process is focused almost entirely upon inputs, and you legislators know this. If the governor requests a $2 billion increase and you only give him a $1 billion increase, you cut the budget $1 billion. Forget that you increased $1 billion. And there's little attention to how has the money actually been spent. Whereas in priority-based budgeting, you don't spend more than a revenue forecast. What a concept. Imagine that. Wow. And you don't rely upon federal stimulus funds. You know, I recently was talking to my friends in Mississippi. You might find this hard to believe. In Mississippi, of their total budget, again, most legislators only look at the general fund state budget. They don't look at the all funds budget. In Mississippi, 49% of their budget comes from the federal government. And like many states, they expect to get more. They expect Medicaid expansion to bring them more money. They expect the federal government to bring them more money. Don't rely on federal stimulus funds, or you'll be sadly mistaken. As Nebraska found out this year, before Obamacare went into effect, because their economy is doing better, they're receiving a smaller match this year in Medicaid funding, and they had their funding cut. Priority-based budgeting asks several questions. We learned this from you in New Zealand. What must the government accomplish? How will the government measure its progress? That's a radical concept, isn't it? Talk about progress. How much money does the government have available? What's the most efficient and effective way to deliver services within the available revenue? So when you look at that, one of the basic questions is, what's the purpose of government? And we would urge legislators to try to work with the governor to come up with a core function of government. What are the 5 to 10 core functions of government? So if you can't get agreement, then maybe you have 5 core functions. The governor has one set, the House Republicans have another set, the House Democrats one set, the Senate Democrats another set, the Senate Republicans another set. But once you come up with the core function, it changes everything. And I'll describe what happened in Washington State in a minute. What are the essential services that government must provide? Not the nice to know, but what are the essential services? You know, we have a city in Detroit in bankruptcy. And what did the legislature do? The conservative legislature and the conservative governor of Michigan, they're funding with public dollars a new hockey rink in Detroit. I don't understand that. How do we know if government's doing a good job? What should all this cost? And if budget cuts are necessary, how can they properly be prioritized? So in Washington State, several years ago, we had a Democrat governor, Democrat House, Republican Senate. And the governor, who had been a legislator, figured he had a $2.8 billion shortfall. And we met with him, and he said, well, the solution is to raise taxes. And that's a typical approach in Washington State. We said, well, Governor, in the early 80s, Republicans were in control, and they raised tax rates in the middle of a recession. And they got less revenue than before, and the voters threw them out of office. He smiled and said, yeah, I remember that. So in the early 90s, you were the chairman of the House Appropriation Committee, and you, along with Governor Lowry, raised tax rates, and you got less revenue, and you were thrown out of office. Well, things are different now. So we convinced him to try performance-based budget. What he did is he came up with 10 core functions of government. And all of the state's 3,400 programs had to fit into one of those 10 core functions of government. Now the great thing, had the conservatives got in control of the state, is 7 of those core functions, I don't believe were functions of government at all. But every program was linked to it. You could have wiped them out with one fell swoop. You wouldn't have to go through anything. But the interesting thing, when you start doing it, it raises some very interesting questions. On education, this is what they came up with. This is coming from the liberals now. That they wanted meaningful childhood education from birth to 5-year, improve student achievement in elementary, middle, and high schools, improve the success of post-secondary learning. As they applied that to the budget, the governor's budget staff came in and said, Governor, we can find no sound academic research that shows reducing class size improves academic performance. In fact, as we look around the world, we can see the opposite. So they didn't reduce class size. Amazing, in a liberal state. Then the other one is, well, Governor, we don't believe you should give salary increases to teachers because we can't find out where the money is to do that without raising taxes on business, and we think that would harm the economy. Well, the governor wanted to do away with the research, so he just said, okay, we'll do it 1 year and not the second. But that was an improvement from what happened before. But probably the best thing that happens when you have core function of government, I participated in this, we had the healthcare agencies get together. We had 10 different healthcare agencies. First half of the day, they argued with the governor's staff, how can you get more money if the guidelines were you can't raise taxes, you can't raise fees? Can we have administrative surcharges? Can we charge more for copies? Can we do this? Can we do that? No, no, no. So then someone had the brilliant idea, why don't we all put our mission statement on the wall? So 10 healthcare agencies put their mission statement on the wall, looked at it, and someone said, that's interesting. None of us have the mission of improving the health care of Washington residents. What are we about? How do you measure performance? Reduction of lost time accidents, how many needles, how many shots we gave, how many people came into the office, etc. Once they come up with the mission of improving the health care of Washington residents, they suddenly were able to prioritize the programs. And so each of these 10 work groups, 10 core functions of government, finished their projects, came back together, and when they ran out of money, they drew a line. There's no money for class size reduction, there's no money for cost of living increases. And then K-12 said, well, we can't get by with this. We just need more money. So they have a trade-off. So higher ed said, okay, if you guarantee, they were foolish in saying this, if you guarantee you will produce a better qualified high school graduate for college, we'll give you $200 million. So they did that. Well, they'll never do it again. Today in Washington State, 54% of our high school graduates who go to college need a remedial course in math or English. And we have a solution for that. Legislators welcome you to use this. Any child who needs a remedial course in college, the high school that kid came from will pay the cost of tuition. I guarantee it will change overnight. Think of this for 1 minute. In most cases, the child going through the K-12 education system has been taught 13 years by a certified classroom teacher and doesn't know math or English. For the 13 to 16 weeks in a community college taught by an uncertified teacher, he or she is made whole. I am missing something. There's something I'm missing in that example in terms of that. But priority-based budgeting does work in that. When you look at core functions, and we have some of these things on our websites, is the activity a core function of government? And if it is, don't just say, oh, this is a core function of government. We have to do it. Why? Is it the law? Is it required by the Constitution? Required by court decisions? Is it something that can be changed? Is it essential for preventing the loss of life? Addressing imminent issues of public safety? Is it necessary for the government? When you look at the core function, you'll suddenly find that a lot of things that you thought are core functions of government really aren't core functions of government anymore. If it's not mandatory, is it required by law? If so, change the law. Now, I don't think your state is as fortunate as North Carolina or Wisconsin, that in the budget they can change substantive state law. For example, in North Carolina this year, they had an amazing budget. Well, they got an amazing budget director, Art Polk, who's just an incredible guy. But they tried to eliminate tenure through the legislature, and they couldn't get an agreement, so they came up and they kind of weakened tenure. They had the approval of the Republicans and Democrats. They passed it overwhelmingly in the House, and the union was happy. In the budget, they eliminated tenure. Because the budget can override substantive law. And they expanded education choice, and they did all these other things. Is it governed by an existing contract? And again, we found out that in collective bargaining agreements when we worked in Wisconsin, they didn't have it go into effect when the contract ends. But somehow you got to put an emergency clause on so they can't do as they did in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and Madison, where they quickly put in new 3-year contracts to try to get around it. It's a part of matching federal funds. And one of the things we urge you to do is what Utah did, and again, this is on our website. Have the legislature go out to all the agencies and have them identify all the federal funds they're receiving and what the maintenance of effort requirements are. And Utah's done a great job of that. You'll be shocked sometimes when you see the maintenance of effort. You may find out that it'd be better for you to say no in the federal funds and it actually costs you more money. And one of the areas that highlight is K-12 education. About 8 years ago, when Senator Gordon was still in the U.S. Senate, they did a study that found out that 70% of the paperwork requirements at the local school district level was to apply for that 8% of federal funds. I'm sure it's much higher with Race to the Top, core curriculum, etc. Does it produce general fund or other state revenue, or is it supported by fees? Then on the proposed core functions, does the activity provide a broad public benefit or only serve a selected clientele? Then get rid of it. Does it duplicate the activities of nonprofits? Another opportunity to get rid of it. Does it duplicate the efforts of other government agencies or programs? Maybe something better can be done in a local government. Can this service or function be provided by the way of performance contracts? And again, we would urge the ability to use more performance-type contracts. Heritage had a great thing several years ago. Mayor Goldsmith, when he was mayor of Indianapolis, we had come out to Washington State several times and talked about the yellow page test. The yellow page, put it up for competitive bid. We used to say privatization, but that's a bad word in our state. Unions go excited. We say competitive bid will allow you to bid on it too. The Heritage Foundation study found out that there's a great deal you can do by competitive bidding. And then I love the questions that were asked in England. Unfortunately, they didn't follow through on that. These are 9 great questions asked. Is this activity essential to meet government priorities? Does the government need to fund the activity? Does the activity provide substantial economic value? Can the activity be targeted to those most in needs? How can the activity provide at a lower cost? What a radical question. How can the activity be provided more effectively? Can the activity be provided by a non-state provider or citizens wholly or in partnership? Can non-state providers be paid to carry out the activity according to the results they achieve? Can local bodies, as opposed to the central government, provide the activity? And then again, lessons I've learned were first the Democrat Leadership Council, which I guess has now disappeared since Bill Clinton is not doing his thing, has really urged performance-based budgeting in the past. With the lessons from New Zealand, I mean, just think of it. If you ask this question of every program coming through, should it be done? Who should do it? And who should pay for it? Those basic questions. Thank you.